Okay, so again, what's the query generator? It's a very simple querying reporting writing tool. It's very simple to use. You don't need any technical experience whatsoever, no SQL programming experience. And what it's really used to do is retrieve data from our database. It's not intended to create updates to the database. It's just to retrieve data. Common uses of the query generator. We obviously want to create the queries and save them as standard queries or standard reports so that we can call them at any time. A lot of people like to take these queries that they create and export them to Excel for further manipulation. And a lot of times we also like to publish them into a crystal report where we can make, a query into something that's really fancy, formatted into a report layout that's desirable. We can also transform these queries into proactive alerts. So we're actually going to show you that today, and we can also transform them into dashboards or KPIs as well. So again, the key benefit is very easy to use. You can reduce IT costs because you can do these yourself. You get instant access to key data on the fly. And you can increase efficiency by automating alerts, for example. So you don't have to keep searching or querying your system for data or for reports. You can actually have the system do the work for you and send you these alerts on a schedule, for example, at 8 o'clock every day. So the agenda today, we're going to start off with a very simple query generator overview. So let's get right to it. So I'm going to open up SAP Business One. So in order to access the query generator, the first thing we're going to do is go up to the top menu where it says Tools, and we're going to go into Queries and Query Generator. There's also another reporting tool called the Query Manager, but for today's demo, we're just going to focus on the Query Generator. Okay. So when we open up the Query Generator, the first thing you're going to notice is 5 boxes here on the right. Okay, so each box represents a segment of your query. For example, we have our select statement. So this refers to all the fields that we're going to select and query. The from box here, this represents the tables that we're actually querying. And then you have a where clause, and these are basically your conditions within your query. And then you have a sort box, so you can sort by certain columns within your query. And then you have the group by clause, which is really used in collaboration with the select statement to arrange identical data into groups. Over here on the top left here, this is where you actually input the name of your table that you want to query. So before we get into that, let's kind of take a step back here and let's pull up a sales order document. So one of the first things you want to do is you want to turn on your system information. And what this does, by turning this box on or checking this box, if I were to hover my mouse over any field, for example, the customer name field, if you look at the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, you're going to see something that says form equals 139, et cetera, et cetera. But look at the last 2 things there. It says ORDR, comma, card code. The capitalized ORDR represents the table that we're going to query. This is the sales order table, ORDR. My cursor is within the customer code field. So the card code that you see at the bottom left represents the field name. So again, our table is ORDR and our field is called card code. If I were to hover my mouse over another area of the sales order, such as the matrix or the grid, let's say I hover my mouse over the item number field. Now the table has changed to RDR1, and that field is called item code, right? My cursor is right here on the item number field, and it's called item code. So that's what it's actually called within the database. Now, what I want to do for today's presentation here is I want to write a sales query. I want to write a sales query that says, show me all my sales orders, right? And I want to show the customer code. I want to see the customer name in my query. I also want to see my posting date. I also want to see the respective item code. I want to see the item name, the quantity, the unit price, and even the doc total. And I also want to know the respective sales employee pertaining to the sales order, right? And this is going to be a great report that we can send maybe to the respective salespeople every day or the sales manager so that they can see how we're doing in sales. So let's go back to our query generator screen. Now, we know just by hovering our mouse over those fields that the table we're going to query is the ORDR table. Now, as soon as I type it in, right, now I see all the respective fields that are related to the ORDR table. I can query any of these fields. Now let's type in the RDR1 table. So again, there's two tables involved in our sales order query. We have the header table, which represents the information at the top of the sales order and at the bottom of our sales order. We also have another table called RDR1, which represents the information captured within the grid. So within our query generator window here in the From window, you actually see the SAP is actually writing the syntax for you. It actually does the inner join syntax for you. So you can see the ORDR table is inner join with the RDR1 table. And it's joined on the doc entry code because the doc entry is a primary key that's available in both tables. And so it's joining these tables based on this primary key or similar field within both tables. Now we can start having fun. So within the ORDR table, remember I wanted to query the document number. So I can just simply double click on that and it's going to populate the select box with the doc num field. I also wanted the posting date. So I'll double click on that. I wanted the customer code. I wanted the customer name. And now I also want information belonging to the grid or the RDR1 table. So I also want to see the respective item code, the description. I want to see the quantity. I want to see the unit price. And I also want to see the line total. But I also want to see the salesperson code belonging to that sales order. Now let's just quickly execute this query. So I'm going to click on this button at the bottom that says execute. And here I got a very simple query with all my query results here. On the top here, you actually see the query itself, right? And then you see the results in here. So I have my document number, my posting date, my customer code, my customer name, item number, the description, quantity, unit price, row total, sales employee. Now, within this window up here, you see a lot of icons right beside it on the left here. This pencil icon, if I click on it, it allows me to actually type in this window and actually freehand. I can actually edit the query within this window if I wanted to. I could do it on the other one, on the previous window, but I could also do it in here. For example, look at this column here. It's called customer vendor code, and this one is called customer vendor name. Well, because it's a sales query, I know it's related just to a customer, so I want to change that description. So I'm going to click on my my mouse here. I'm going to put my cursor that right there. I'm going to type in as a little tip. If you ever want to change the column description, all you got to do is type in the word as, and then double quotes, and put in the respective column name you want. So I want to rename it to customer code, double quotes, and over here, I'm going to type in as again, and I want to rename this to customer name. And if I click on execute again, you can see I've changed the column name. Okay. You also have, obviously you can actually click on this icon here to deactivate edit mode. So now the screen is locked. I can't type anything in there. So I can type, nothing's going to happen. I can also expand this window, clicking on the plus sign, right? Just more real estate to do some of your freehand querying for some of you advanced users. It's also just better to see, your query, because sometimes these queries can get really, really long, and you want to see the entire query. You can actually maximize that entire window by clicking on this button here, and then you can see the entire window. Okay. You also have some buttons at the bottom here. So, for example, I can reverse the table. So now I've got everything backwards, and reverse it again. I can even copy this data. So if I click on here, I can copy this data and I can paste it into, Notepad or Excel. I can even export this to Excel as well for further manipulation just by clicking on this button here. Okay. So let's just do that real quick just so I can show you. So just like that, I can export all my information to Excel for further manipulation. Okay. I don't want to save that. So let's go back to our query. And again, you can save this query, right? Just by clicking on the save button here. And what it's going to do, it's going to save it within our query manager. And you can see I've got a folder called sales. And I'm going to call this sales query 1, right? So now I can call that query at any time. I can run that report, this query anytime I want. Okay. I can even click on this icon here to export my results into a bar chart if I wanted to. You can change it to you can change the settings here. You can delete which particular columns you want to see within your chart as well, etc. Okay. So let's go back to our query here. So as you can see here in our query, we've got some golden arrows. So the really cool thing about this is that you can drill into information on the fly, and you can get the particulars of that actual sales order document. But one thing you might notice over here is that look at the sales employee code, right? It doesn't really tell us much. I'm looking at the actual sales employee code, but I actually want the sales employee name because that's a little bit more meaningful to me, right? So how do I find the sales employee name? Well, the sales employee name is actually stored in a completely different table. If I were to drill, for example, into sales employee code number 1, it's going to open up my sales employee table here. And I could hover my mouse over the sales employee name, and if I look at the bottom left of my screen, I know that the table is called OSLP, and the sales employee name field is called SLP name, as you can see in the bottom left. So let's add that to our query. Again, I could freehand, I could type it in this window, but let's go back to the query generator window over here. And what we want to do is add 2 things. We want to add the OSLP table, and then we want to add the SLP field to our query. Now, there's 3 ways to do this, right? So, obviously, the easiest way, I'm going to show you, not a lot of people know this, but whenever you see a bolded field here, a bolded field here means that this particular field is joined with another table. There's a table join. So I could actually take this, if I click on here with my mouse and I hold down my left mouse button, and I'm going to drag and drop the SLP code over here. What it's going to do is automatically going to populate the respective joining table, the OSLP table. And I can see over here in my from that you can see it's actually done an inner join, my OSLP table, based on the SLP code, which is captured on both the RDR1 table and the OSLP table, right? Here's another button that I didn't show you down here. There's this button here, this double arrow button. If I were to click on this double arrow button, it's going to select all the respective fields within the highlighted table, in this case OSLP. So I can do that. I'll click here on the double arrow. Let's put our cursor in here. Click on the double arrow, and you can see it's going to put in all the fields belonging to OSLP. And then you also have this other icon here with the X, and this is to delete. Now, what I want you to do is take a look. When I click on this X button, I'm going to delete the OSLP table, but also focus on what happens not only here on the joined OSLP table that just got populated, but also focus on all the respective OSLP fields when I click on the X button. Right? It automatically deleted the join between the OSLP table and all the respective fields belonging to OSLP table. So why is that important to you? It takes the thinking out of it. You don't have to be a technical person. You don't have to remember, oh, which fields belong to the OSLP table? Did I remember to remove them from my query when I deleted that table? No, the system does that all for you. Okay? Now, the second way to find a table, other than hovering over your mouse over a respective field, is I can click on this field here, and I can click on the tab key on my keyboard, and what that does is it brings up a list of all the tables. This is every single table within SAP Business One, and I can scroll down and find the OSLP table, or I could just type it in here in the OSLP and under Find, so OSLP. And you can see it highlights the sales employee table. I'll choose it, right? Now again, you can see it's created an inner join automatically for you. Join that salesperson table automatically for you. And again, if I click on the X button here, the easiest way is to just type it in here. So you can just type in OSLP, hit tab, and again, you see all the respective fields belonging to OSLP. So what I'm going to do here is I want the sales employee name. So I'm going to double click on there. I'm going to execute my query. And now I've got the sales employee name. Right? So now that I've got the sales employee name, I don't need the sales employee code. I can get rid of it within this window. Right? So if I go up here, what I like to do, just a little tip here, is I like to separate my statement. So I have my select statement on one row. I've got my from statement on another. And I would put my work statement on another, my group by statement on another, and my sort statement on another row as well. Just makes it clear. So in this case, I could just freehand. Again, I could put my cursor in there, and I could backspace and delete the SLP code, and I could execute my query again. And now you see the SLP code is gone from my query. But keep in mind, every time I close this window, and let's say I execute the query from here, it's going to put it back, because it's going to put the sales employee code back, because that field still exists up here in my select statement window. So what I want to do is I actually want to delete it from here. Just going to backspace. Right, and you need a comma between your fields. And remember, I created those, I renamed some of those columns in my other window using the as field, so it went away. So what I want to do is I actually want to put that in here in this window so it sticks. So I'm going to say as customer code, double quotes, and I do the same thing over here as customer name, double quotes, and I'm going to execute that. Now you can see it sticks, right? Unless I save it. If I save it, then it'll stick. Okay, so what we can also do now is we can start sorting. So for example, I've got, automatically the system's going to sort by the first column here, which is the document number. You can see it's sorting in ascending order. But maybe I want to sort by this column here, my unit price. So what I want to do is go back into my other window here. And my unit price field, I'm just going to double click, and I want to sort by unit price. So if I execute my query again, you can see it's sorting my unit price from lowest to biggest. Right? But in this case, I want to sort it in descending order. So here's a little tip. I just type in DESC, and if I click on execute, now you can see unit price column is being sorted from biggest number to lowest number. Okay. What I also want to show you is some conditions. So if I click on this condition button here, we have some conditions on the right here. We also have some variables over here. So let's run our query again. Now, obviously, the conditions allow you to, set parameters. You can do filters. You can set rules, for example. Like, for example, I only want to see my results by a certain salesperson. Now, obviously, in your query preview window, you can filter. You can filter your results in here. So, for example, I could say where my sales employee name is equal to Dwight Schrute. And I could say filter. And I'm only going to see sales orders for Dwight Schrute, right? But what if I want to put that logic right into the query itself? Because when you do that filter, it doesn't save your result. So I want those results filtered within the query. So what I could say is where the sales employee name, so I'm going to go with my OSLP table, and I'm going to double click on sales employee name, and I'm going to say equal, right? And I'm going to say Dwight Schrute. I can just type in, put cursor in here. Oop, cap locks here. So I could execute that, and you can see I've got it here in my where statement, right? So we're only seeing results for Dwight Schrute. But let's take it even further. I've got something over here which look like percent signs followed by a 0. You have up to 20 of these, and you can basically create a parameter using a variable such as a sales employee name, so that you get a prompt. Every time you run your query, I want a prompt that says, hey, which sales employee do you want to run this report for? Right? So in this case, what I'm going to do here, I'm going to just double click on this here. So now I have a where clause that says, prompt me for the sales employee. So when I execute that, I get a prompt that says, okay, do you want to run it for sales employee Dwight or Michael or no sales employee? In this case, let's choose Michael Scott. And now we can see all the results for Michael Scott. Okay. Another thing we can do here is we also have some other conditions. For example, greater than, smaller than, greater or equal to, smaller or equal than, smaller or equal to, not equal, contains, etc., etc. So let's just say we take out our where clause here and we run our query again. You can see that we've actually got some zero unit prices. We got some zero row totals because these are gifts. These are gifts that we've given to our customer for free, so there's no price associated with them. But we don't want any of these within our query. We don't care to see any orders that were sold at a zero price, right? So what we can do is we can say where the unit price is not equal to zero. So let's go back to unit price here. And we say not equal to 0. We can also put an AND statement here. I can type it in or I can click on here. And where the row total is not equal to 0 as well, right? Because we don't want to see any rows with a 0 price or a 0 line total. So if I execute that and I scroll down, now I don't see any results with a 0 unit price or a 0 row total. Here's another really cool trick. If I want to see the sum of any column, let's say, for example, I want to sum the quantity column or the quantity, the unit price or the row total, I'm going to hold down my control key on my keyboard, and then I'm going to double click with my left mouse button on the header here. You can see it sums the total quantity. I can do it on unit price. I can do it on row total. So I can see the totals there as well. All right. So again, let's save this. We're going to go back. We're going to save our query. I think we called it sales query 1. Save that. It already exists. You want to replace it? Just say yes. We're just going to overwrite the last query that we created. Okay. So let's go back here. Now, if you did, remember when I talked about some aggregates, like a sum or a min-max or a count, you can group all of your results for similar data using the group by clause, right? But we don't really need to see that today. Okay, so we're happy with our query. What we're going to do now is we're going to save it as an alert because we want to see this query every day at 8 a.m. So as a sales manager, I want to know exactly what's being sold by my sales employees every day. And I'm not going to put a filter on this. I don't want to run it for a certain employee. I just want to run it for all employees. I want to know exactly what they're selling, right? So what I could do if I wanted is I'm going to go, I'll just minimize this. I'm going to go into administration. I'm going to go into alerts. And I'm going to call this sales report, daily sales report. And I'm going to click on this button here to open that query. And we called it Sales Query 1. And what I want to do is I actually want to assign it to my manager. And if I wanted to, they could receive it by email as well. They could get the internal email or alert, I should say, which is going to pop up on the screen. And I could have it so that it's scheduled, every minute, every hour, every day, every week, every month. For example, he's going to want to see it every day at 8 a.m. So I'll do that. But for today's demonstration, maybe I'll just do it for every 1 minute, just so that you can see how it shows. And then I make sure it's clicked on active. And if you want, you can change the priority from low, normal to high. And click on add. So within a minute or so, we'll get a pop-up on our screen because it's set to every minute, reminding us of or informing us of how much our salespeople are selling. So again, these are proactive reports. Everything starts with a query, right? We can transform these queries into proactive reports. And we can even take that same query and we can transform it into one of these dashboards that you see up here on my screen, right? So, for example, every dashboard or KPI is powered by an underlying query. So what we could do is take one of the queries that we wrote and use it to build a dashboard, right? So any query that we write using Query Generator, it can be used to create a dashboard. So how do we do that? So the first thing we want to do is go under Pervasive Analytics. And we want to build a new dashboard just based on that query. Now what I'll do is I'm going to find that query here in this folder. Remember that sales query, that sales folder we have? So we have one called Sales Query 1, but you can see I've got a lot of other queries in here as well that I've written, all using the Query Generator. So for example, I've got one here called Top 2 Salespeople based on total AR, right? So I can click on there, and you can see in the preview window up here, it's actually going to show you a preview of that query that I wrote in the Query Generator, and you get a snapshot of what the query results are. So I have a salesperson name, their total sales amount. I've got Michael and Dwight, their respective total sales amount. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say OK. And what I can do is actually build a dashboard. I want to see, for example, my total sales amount. This is my measure, usually a dollar amount, for example. And I want to see my salesperson name. And now on the right here, you're going to see a preview of a bar chart of what that would actually look like. It doesn't have to be a bar chart. It could be a line chart, a pie chart, for example, right? In this case, I want it to be a bar chart. And maybe I want it in descending order. So I want to sort. So I have my number one salesperson first. And then I can click on this checkbox to save it. And I'll give it the dashboard a name. Top 2 sales rep. So now I want to add that dashboard, that bar chart that I just created to my screen here. So I'm going to click on this pencil, click on the plus sign, I'm going to say add. And we're just going to find that bar chart we just created. So here it is, top 2 sales reps. Click on the plus button. Click on the back arrow here. And our little check mark. And now you can see I've got that little bar chart over here. Okay, I can make that bigger, for example, so it looks a little bit nicer. Okay, so now I've got a really nice dashboard that gives me quick access to information, right? And it all started with the query generator. I built a nice little sales query. I took bits and pieces of that sales query and I dragged them into a respective dashboard. For example, in this case, I took the salesperson name and the salesperson total sales amount. I dragged those two fields into my dashboard here, and now I've got a nice representation that shows me how well they're performing on my screen. So I got quick access to information. Okay. So that kind of just shows you, how queries can be really created very simply using the query generator and how they can be transformed into alerts and into dashboards or KPIs. Okay. So with that being said, that kind of concludes today's query generator demo.